You're listening to The Upland Rookie, a podcast presented by Onyx Hunt, Final Rise, and Inukshuk Professional Dog Food. And welcome to episode 83, part 2 of the conversation with Ryan Mulcahy from Born to Run Kennels. And this podcast is also presented to you by Onyx Hunt, the most comprehensive public and private land ownership data mapping tool in the world. Many tools and layers like crop types, tree species, waypoints, and so much more. The Onyx Elite membership is going to give you a ton of access to a whole bunch of benefits, discounts on awesome gear. If you're not using Onyx Hunt already, I highly encourage you, get over to onyxhunt.com and sign up today. And be sure to check out Inukshuk Professional Dog Food, the only sporting dog, high-performance dog food I'm feeding my string of dogs. Have been using this for several years, and Inukshuk has delivered and lived up to and surpassed all the hype you've been hearing about online through friends, kennels, breeders, all that. And it has just been a high-quality premium food. I've been able to cut back several cups of food for my dogs, still keeping weight on them during season, during trialing, whatever it might be. These dogs are in the best shape they've been in, personally, in a long, long time. And thanks to Inukshuk Professional Dog Food, they have 4 incredible formulas. Check them out at inukshukpro.com. And last but not least, Final Rise Gear. I am so pumped and proud to be representing the Final Rise brand. They have been producing year after year quality premium upland gear that is made for the hunter, the bird hunter who is putting on miles after miles, season after season, and wants gear to hold up to the elements of how you are hunting. You got to look no further than finalrise.com. Check out the Summit vest, the Summit XT vest, which is brand new, the Sidekick vest, as well as the Legacy. So many vest options, which are totally customizable. I'm pretty darn confident you're going to find something that works for you and your setup. So check them out at finalrise.com. Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Upland Rookie Podcast. This is part 2 of the conversation with Ryan Mulcahy from Born to Run Kennels. Super pumped to have you guys finish this episode up with me. We did have a couple difficulties towards the end here with some recording quality stuff. We pieced it together though. We had someone's internet go out. I'm not going to name names, Ryan. We had couple different interruptions. We both had to pee again, so we had to take a pause there. So a couple different things you'll notice maybe towards the very end of the show. But again, we pulled it together, we persevered, and we finished the episode. So I hope you guys enjoy this one. Man, I've just been really appreciative of Ryan and just his knowledge and his experiences, kind of really breaking them down and sharing them with me. I love getting other perspectives and thoughts, and Ryan's always pushing me with things and how I think about dogs and intelligence and breeding and really, what you're looking for in a bird dog to reproduce a breeding, or what you're looking for to reproduce in a dog. So I've appreciated him pushing me over the last couple of years and just in my thinking, and so really appreciate it. We're going to go over a couple things here, and we'll get right into the rest of the episode. Don't forget, we have a giveaway happening over at patreon.com. So make sure you're signed up as a Patreon supporter, and you'll be entered into the giveaway from Gunner Kennels, giving away I shouldn't say brand new. It's been out for over a year now. But one of their Gunner Fan Kit 2.0. I'm going to give one of those away to a listener of the show. Just make sure you're signed up on Patreon as a supporter of this show, and I'll be drawing a winner here in the next several weeks. Great fan kit, durable. It's going to last. Got an incredibly long battery life, which is really nice. And you can pretty much mount it to any kennel you have. So that's another perk. Of course, if you have a Gunner kennel, that is going to be even better. But Gunner Fan Kit 2.0, going to give one of those away, as well as an Upland Rookie hat to one of the Patreon supporters. So go get signed up if you're not already. I'm also going to I have not done one of these in forever. Like, I can't remember the last time I read a listener review. Cannot remember. So we're going to scroll through here, and I'm going to pick one. It's back in November. Jeez, that was a while ago. Okay. We're going to read this one. It's titled What I Was Looking For, from JB Nelson, 09, back in November 2022. It says, not a new bird hunter, but just got my first bird dog. This will be her first year, and I've been nervous. This podcast has really helped motivate me to get over my hesitation to travel to get on some birds. Awesome content. I live in North Texas, and driving is really the only way to get into wild birds. Thanks for putting this podcast together. It was the exact thing I was looking for. Well, thank you very, very much for putting that review out there, taking time to kind of let me know what this podcast has meant to you, what it has helped you accomplish. And so other reviews like this, guys, this is the stuff that again, helps me keep a pulse on how the show is doing. How is it connecting with you? Whether, like this listener here, they're not new to bird hunting. They picked up their first bird dog recently. That's what I love. I love that this show has been able to connect with those who are brand new to the sport, but also those who have been doing it a while. I talk with listeners all the time who are, I would consider just pros or veterans of upland hunting. They've been doing it forever, have developed some amazing dogs, and they're listening to the show and they're taking something away from it. Maybe it inspired them to try something new, to explore a new area, to get back into hunting, whatever it might be. And then, of course, the new hunters out there, the new people who are just getting into the sport, picking up their first dogs. So that's kind of the heartbeat of why I love doing this show, is connecting with listeners from such a broad range of experiences, backgrounds. So if you guys have not already left a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, I would greatly appreciate. Just take less than a minute, head over there, leave a review, and that little star system that they have on Apple. You can also do it on Spotify. I think they just have a star system over there. Would greatly appreciate it. Again, thank you for writing that review. I don't know what your actual name is. Nielsen, his last name maybe? Yeah, that's what it's titled. So send me your address, though. I'll shoot you off a sticker if that was you who wrote the review. And then I'll try to do some more of these reviews a little more often, maybe send out a sticker to you guys as well. So would greatly appreciate that. Other than that, guys, I don't have any other announcements. We got a couple great guests lined up for the spring here. I'm excited to share those episodes with you as well. But we're going to jump back into the part 2 of the Ryan Mulcahy series. Hope you guys enjoy this one.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, good. I think it's a podcast first right there, a little potty break.
Yeah. Well, I don't feel as embarrassed by this after listening to Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard, because his guests all the time are like, "Hey, can I go to the bathroom?"
Okay.
And they keep it rolling, and it's pretty funny. It's yeah, we got a bathroom, and you hear the toilet flush. You know, you hear it going on, and it's hilarious. So I'm like,
that's
whatever,
awesome.
Whatever.
Might as well.
Yeah, and I remember I've done a couple, and it's always like you get part way in, and I've always got to go. So it's just how it is. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. It keeps it real, man. Keeps it real.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Can you, this is something you and I have chatted about quite a bit over the last couple of years that we've known each other and been, whatever, talking on Instagram.
Yeah.
Wild birds.
Yeah.
Like developing a dog on wild birds.
Yeah.
Cause I know that's been a big part when you were up in Idaho and Montana and all that, really doing some of your training actually on wild birds versus pen raised and planted birds. Can you talk a little bit about what the benefit that you've seen from running dogs on wild birds and just unpack that a little more?
Yeah. So I have not worked a dog on a pen raised bird, and I'm not talking about a pigeon, but I'm talking about pen raised quail or chucker. I don't think I've worked a dog on those birds since 2014.
Jesus.
And even then I had birds that I would do hanging baskets, which I learned from George. And basically I would do a whole hanging basket thing. And then, basically you hoist it up 20 some feet into a tree, and then you've already let out some birds, and you just let them kind of congregate in that area. And then you bring a dog through on your course, and you can make a controlled situation. So what I used to do is I would, instead of using pigeons back then, I would do hanging basket quail. And then I would work those birds. And then when I was done working those birds, I would drop the baskets, and the birds would go up their funnel back into the basket. And, and they had feed and water in there. And then after that, I would drive 2 miles down the road, and I'd work those dogs on grouse and woodcock. So the whole idea was to gain control and then transition it. And I would do it in the same day. So like I might do 20 minutes, 30 minutes at most of controlled work. And then I would do 30 minutes to an hour of wild birds. And controlled work, unpack that a little more. Controlled work meaning you're trying to recreate a wild bird situation? The controlled work is you're trying to help a dog around birds to be steady to wing, shot, and kill. Okay. So I may not be killing them, but I'm getting them broke out. And so I train dogs a lot differently. So one of the big things that Bill Gibbons used to talk about was wild bird action. So when you're in that situation, to create wild bird action. Well, a wild bird doesn't sit in front of a dog, and you don't just stand there saying that dog, whoa, and this and that. So that's why a lot of the field trials bother me, because it's just too much control. It's too much man-made crap. And I'm going to say it that way because you're too involved with the dog, and I hate that. I want to see what the natural qualities of the animal are. And so what he would speak about is wild bird action. So you think about wild bird action. Well, that means when the dog is pointed, a young dog is pointed, and say that it's pointing a pen-raised quail. And then all of a sudden that dog decides to break and go in on that bird. Well, you're not going to give the dog a thrashing. You're not going to give him a correction. But that bird needs to get the heck out of there, right? Well, it doesn't because it's a stupid quail. And it's sitting on the ground. So now that dog grabs that quail. Well, now he can form a habit, and now you've got to be more involved, which creates that flagging and ticking, and it creates so many other issues because now you've got to get involved. These are not a lab. These are a bird dog. This is they're supposed to be a natural animal.
Sure.
But when you create that situation, you create problems. So what I do is I go from I can come into that later, but what I do is I go into from a pigeon perspective first, and you're essentially teaching them you can't catch them. All right. So that's the whole layman's term. You can't catch this bird, but it's wild bird action. Sure. So the whole idea is I can control the action of that pigeon and get the bird out of the situation. And it teaches that dog, you're not catching them on the ground. So you never form that poor habit. Now, if you use launchers and you use them all the time and you're constantly using pigeons, you can create a lot of other bad habits. And you can also create dogs that don't hunt. So if I'm working multiple days a week for a whole year outside the hunting season, and I've got this 5-year-old pointer that I don't know why anybody that would need to have a 5-year-old dog on pigeons in a launcher at that point. To me, it doesn't matter at that point. If they're 5 years old, you've probably put enough miles on them hunting wise that they would be broke out or be steady enough. You're essentially going back because the equation of a pigeon is just a concept. It's just teaching a concept. You point them, I flush them, I kill them, you stand there. That's it.
Sure.
Or birds in the air mean plant your feet. Stop the flush. Right. Real easy.
Sure. Cause they're not hunting the pigeon, obviously. Right.
And it's just, you're creating like a sterile environment.
It's like a test.
Well, it's not even just you're just teaching a concept. So, you have a sterile environment so that there's nothing else in the way of it. And then all you're doing is teaching a concept to them. When that bird is in the air, plant your feet. That's it. That's what stop the flush means. So, so basically when I went to the pigeon side and then I had more wild birds out west, I just haven't gone back to pen raise at all. Okay. Now the new location, the owner has a place, I think he's got 1,900 acres. That's all pen raised birds. And he's got a string of his own dogs, about 5 of them that will be primed up for that style of hunting. But what I like, if I have a dog that I'm grooming for that scenario, I'm going to start with, as a youngster, I'm going to start with other scenarios. I'm going to work every type of bird, and then I'm going to steady them up when they can handle more pressure. But the problem that we have is if you put too much pressure on them too early, then you start having a lot of issues around birds, around game.
Sure.
And you want to keep that natural intensity as much as possible. So,
so running when you run a dog on wild birds for training purposes, do you ever find yourself wishing you had a more controlled environment to train that dog?
No. And the reason being, the grounds that I trained on, and the style that I did at different times of the year created really good opportunities. So, and I'll explain this. So being in Idaho, the biggest lava rock and the footing and everything beats up a dog's feet. Okay. We know that. Slopes beat up shoulders and hips, and different joints. But when they're a young dog doing exposure with them, you don't have tall grass. You don't have heavy cover. You might have sagebrush, but you don't have all these other elements. So the variables are really low. And especially whether people like this or not, I train in the spring. I am not chasing birds. I have heard horror stories, and I think it's despicable with some of these guys. And I'm not talking about the handlers, because a lot of the handlers understand what's going on out there. But I've heard about, hunters going out with their dogs and their dogs running down and catching blue grouse and doing stupid things like that. I hate that. And it gives it a bad name. I do not chase coveys. Even in hunting season, I don't chase them. Mm-hmm. I don't chase paired birds. When you put them to flight, you move on. So what that allows, though, is all your grass is laid down because you came out of the winter. It's like a golf course. Okay. And then you've got water, which dogs can get in, they can wallow in, they can learn to cool themselves off, they can keep themselves hydrated. Their scenting ability is better. So they can get these birds pointed and get good work in on them. And it might be a pair of birds. Well, a lot of those birds aren't nesting until either late April or early May. So, and you know when the scenting goes off, right? So we know when to get the heck out of there. And I've never caught.
Don't push it.
And then this is the thing, in doing it in 8 years, I've never, ever caught or pointed any birds on a nest. So
will you run young dogs on birds too? Okay.
Yeah.
Because again, the birds are wild. I mean, they're wild birds, so they're going to get the heck out of Dodge.
Right. But when I was training on those grounds, I knew where in the fall and winter, I knew where almost every covey was. And your Huns are usually very territorial. They're back in the same area almost every year. And then your Chucker were a little bit more transient in certain regards, but you knew where they typically were. Blue grouse, I knew where they would come down in the spring, and that was good for young dogs to learn those birds. And then occasionally you'd have sage grouse in those areas. And then we used to have more valley quail until about 2016, when that really bad snow year. And then those grounds, the valley quail have not come back into, we used to have like 50 bird coveys. And it was just like
of valley quail.
Yeah. And
oh my gosh,
the birds have not come back into that area since the snow. So, not at the same amount that they were. And then this year, Idaho got tremendous amount of snow. So I'm hoping that they have a really good year without any drought, because the last 5 years have basically been drought in the spring. It's been really interesting to watch. But I would work dogs consistently, and I might have a broke dog, and I might have a dog I'm breaking out, or I might have a broke dog and a flock of puppies. And I'll have that broke dog on the ground, and I'll bring puppies in behind him. And so that's why I say Rue did a lot of work for me. I mean, it was consistent.
In helping those younger dogs too?
Yeah, in an hour workout, he might have 8 to 10 pairs of birds pointed in an hour. Well, those puppies got that exposure. They got in those situations. But it was pretty funny because after a while, you would notice him start getting irritated that they were knocking his birds. And he would leave the situation. Well, he wouldn't leave the birds, but he would, when you sent him forward after the puppies flushed the birds and I shot the blank pistol, and he'd still be standing there. Those puppies would be running around. When I'd send him after that, his next cast might be a half mile. And you knew he was frustrated.
I'm done.
Yeah, he's like, I got to get away from these pups. And you might
put a little distance.
Yeah, and then you might have to run him by himself for a workout or whatnot.
Okay.
But he did a lot of work for me on those pups. And honestly, actually, here's a kind of a plug-in, but the Inukshuk has really helped that dog because he still looks really good. He broke a toe this year.
That's awesome.
In Texas, but other than that, I mean, physically he looks really good. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I mean,
he's how old now?
He's 11.
11. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that's awesome. Good old Inukshuk. I know you've been running that for a while.
Yeah.
With your dogs now.
I think we're at over 3 years now.
Okay.
But yeah, it's been wonderful. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. One of the things, kind of maybe part of the pen raised bird conversation a little bit. Again, something you and I have chatted a little bit about.
Yeah.
Kind of the field trial side of things as well.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that a little bit earlier. You mentioned kind of it's really just showing your dog. Mm-hmm. Share some of your thoughts around field trials, your like of it, your dislike of it. Some of your thoughts around that.
Well, I love field trials. I do. I really love field trials. I love wild bird field trials because I like wild birds. But, some of the dogs I got to watch, like Aaron's War Creek, who was national champion, and Sugar Knoll War Paint. I mean, he wasn't national. I don't think he was a national champion, but he was, I think he was like 16 times. I think he's in the Hall of Fame now. I'm not sure if he got elected or not, but I know they were trying to get him in. But those two dogs, like watching them, and I'm just using those names, but they were, Great River Ice was still alive at that time, and he was still winning. And, watching those dogs, they're all pen raised, like they're single course dogs. They were single course dogs up in the Northeast. They were tremendous bird dogs. They really were. But they also had a different style than a West Coast dog, because what happens when you run those single courses, it's a different type of judgment. A lot of these dogs are running the same lines. It's a little more sterile of an environment. And your birds, when you move a bird, someone at the back end of the gallery comes by and they throw, they take a Nolan Ryan, chuck down with a bird at the ground, right? they fire them right down, right? And they make that bird kind of stand around in that area. Well, that's fun, but that's a demonstration. Now, those dogs, and I'm not taking anything away from those dogs, because there's a lot of other things that they're doing that are really at such a high standard that you may not see in wild bird trials. But the wild bird trial is you have a little bit less control from your birds, right? And it could be wider country. There could be other things going on. Don't ever take it as this putting one of those dogs down, because they were really, really special animals. But there are certain dogs that are bred that are extremely, extremely good in that type of scenario that may struggle if they were on wild birds all the time out west. And vice versa. You take a West Coast dog.
I was just going to ask, do you feel it's both ways?
Oh, absolutely. If you took a dog and you said, This dog has been winning all over the West and all these wild bird trials. Well, they may not do as well in a single course field trial. It's a different venue. Now, that being said, if you would have put George Tracy out west, he would have kicked the shit out of just about anyone. I'm sorry to get in it. He's that good. He's that adaptable. And he would have gotten things accomplished. There's just no other way. I mean, I think Harold Ray was running dogs in the grouse woods, and he was also running them in all age trials back in the day.
Okay.
I think most of them were shooting dogs, but a lot of those dogs would have transitioned to all age. We have this concept now, because of it being so extreme, that an all age dog just runs off on you. Well, the all age dogs that used to win back in the day, like Redwater Rex, or even Silver Bullet, they would be considered a big running shooting dog now, or just a good running shooting dog. A lot of those shooting dogs right now that are running, like War Paint or War Creek or any of those dogs, if you would have taken them from George's string and say that, back when he was alive, if George used to say this, if Robin Gates would have taken them, they'd be all age dogs 2 weeks later. Huh. So it just, this concept that we have is really skewed because people have never really seen an all age dog. And a lot of them have never even seen a real shooting dog. A real shooting dog is really, really fun to watch, and they're really refined. That's what the shooting dog was. And I want to say the shooting dog came in either in like 68 or 72. I can't remember what year they started the shooting dog, but originally everything was all age. So this whole
that all age was a standard kind of. That was the original.
Yeah, and then they started a shooting dog classification to show more refinement. And so you look at that, and things have changed, but in the grand scheme of things, they haven't changed that much. The difference is we don't have the same amount of wild birds that we once did on the East Coast. And so, that's kind of the change of that field trial. So, and a lot of these guys are breeding to win those trials.
Sure.
So the characteristics that win them. So,
and because there's all age stuff now that's both planted birds and wild birds, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, but are you saying that those two types of, in today's age right now, the all age wild bird stuff versus the shooting dog or all age planted birds, are you saying those are still two very different types of dogs?
Well, I don't know if you've noticed this, but at Ames, there's a lot of people that are not running dogs at Ames anymore that are qualified. And because Ames Plantation does not really, the venue doesn't really show, it doesn't typically show a good way of a wild bird dog.
Okay.
And it shows a certain type of dog that has had a lot of training and a lot of refinement. And a lot of guys that come out west and they come to watch the national, they come and they see the grounds, and the grounds are a lot different than obviously out west. But they said the dog that wins that is essentially a big running shooting dog at most. I said, absolutely, because the grounds dictate that. A real all age dog that's grabbing in there, it's really hard of a venue to get them around. But I want to say there was a couple of years ago, there were 40 some dogs that were qualified for Ames. And I want to say that, I can't remember if it was 18 or if it was 28, but there was only 18 or 28 dogs that ran at the national championship that year. Everybody started pulling their dogs because the venue really didn't show their animals well. And they've been wanting, and so, everybody talks about this pre-release program until they start seeing bird crates, right? And now they're like, okay, this is it's just,
my dog's not going to thrive in that.
Well, it's hard to.
Kind of scenario.
It's hard to. And then when this year, the two amateur dogs that were qualified were drawn during some of the worst weather. Well, now the amateur is paying, I want to say it's either $550 or $650 to enter that dog, make all the commitment of getting that dog south beforehand, possibly with another trainer, so that, there's thousands of dollars in the hole, and then they go to run them, and they might only get to run them for an hour because it's not even worth trying to go 3 hours. They're not finding birds. They've got terrible, it's a really hard venue at this point in time. It's really hard without any wild birds to say, hey, look, we're going to really get after it. And this is my opinion. I think that if there was a way for them to have wild birds, it would change the mental perspective of the handler. I really think it would change.
Because most of these dogs are typical wild bird dogs.
A lot of them are, yes.
Going to this Ames that are, you're saying there's more release birds.
Yes. Yep. It's all release birds. Ames has no wild birds. It is all release birds. I don't think they've had wild birds since like 2004.
Okay. So here's a question. Here's a question for you. I'm curious on your thought. So in your mind, then, what is the difference? What are the characteristics of a badass wild bird dog versus? I guess first off of that, what's your definition of a great wild bird dog?
A quality wild bird dog.
Yeah.
Well, first thing is one that stays hooked up to the handler. So mental composure to the handler. I don't care about, what type of range they have. If they're 50 yards or 1,000 yards, they still need to keep the handler in mind. One that naturally knocks the front. So they constantly find themselves in front of you and hang out there. And then the one thing that people don't talk about much anymore, but natural character around birds. So we go through all these breaking processes, and everybody's got their own. And it's like, I'll tell you what, some of these SOBs that I've been around, like these dogs, they're just waiting to knock birds. And then I've got dogs that constantly, if you get on them, you might make them too cautious around birds. So there's a fine line, and that's genetics, but there's a fine line between the two of them. And so that character around birds, I never really understood it until one of my mentors, Franklin Asa, really talked about it. And then I bought a pup from him, and I thought, oh my goodness, it was night and day difference from what I had been accustomed to. And then I started training differently because now my whole string is out of that line. And even the dogs that I'm breeding now have similar characteristics to that. So it changed the perspective of the way I looked at it. I no longer want to be, having to break a dog and re-break them and remind them at 5, 6, 7 years old. I'm tired of that. When we start getting things kind of steadied up, or just a dog that's naturally very steady, then I don't have to do much on taking their chase. They just want it. And then those are the types of dogs that when you put them in these pulley systems and start, heaving them around and hauling them, in these other breaking scenarios, they don't do well. And then people are like, oh, that dog's garbage. Well, that dog didn't need that. He wanted to stay planted around birds, or she wanted to stay planted around birds, and they wanted to keep birds on the ground because that is what their natural characteristics were.
And I was just going to say, kind of all those qualities you mentioned, I think the emphasis is, from your, correct me if I'm wrong, is naturally, right? Like doing those things kind of out of their breeding, and not, because you can train a dog to stay in front. You can train a dog to kind of stay in check with you, put them in scenarios, right? Yeah. But I think your emphasis of what you're saying is really, I want dogs that do that naturally. And is that question I wrote down, or the comment you made about man-made intelligence versus true intelligence, this is kind of in that same conversation, right? Yeah.
So you think about a lab. A lab is a man-made dog. That's what they have been made to do everything for a human, that they like, everything revolves around you. A pointer, and I would, it's hard. I'll just say a pointer. Okay. I'm not knocking any other breed, but the pointer was developed to be a certain type of dog with you in mind. All right. Now, we've got a lot of runoffs, and that is absolutely a stereotype. There's no doubt about it, because everybody gets in this whole scenario of breed hot to hot to hot, right? And, breed an amped up dog to another amped up dog to another amped up dog. Well, then they can run off the edge of the earth, right? And they're not hunting, they're just running. And you're like, okay, now I got to get him under control. Well, now you might have to do something catastrophic to get him under control. I've said this to a lot of people because they say, well, you can't push a rope. You can't make that dog run. Most of those people would ruin the dogs that I produce. And the reason being is when a lot of these dogs that I've been working, when they start to get broke out and steadied up and they have a find, the next cast into the country is going to be even bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're going to become more efficient and they're going to become more bold and more focused. Okay. That's a difference. I'm not trying to rope them in at that point. They already know to handle for me. So they're already hooked up to me when they're doing that move. But
what is that? That's breeding, right?
That's breeding. That's breeding.
Genetics.
That's breeding, and that's breeding a certain type of dog. And so that's a dog that I personally like. I don't like the dogs that I constantly have to hack on and be on all the time. That just gets old over a while. I've got a couple of them out there. The one I've kind of jokingly called her No Surrender should be her paper name. But I mean, there's things like, it's not fun when you have to get her attention, and it might last 2 or 3 weeks at most. And then next thing you know, and when I'm in Texas on the truck, she has to have a bark collar on it all the time. Because, because if you're running another dog and you shoot on a covey, she knows
she's losing her mind.
She's losing it. And she is losing her mind. So when she hits the ground, she's trying to take on too much. And
her mind's not in the right space.
Exactly. It's not tunnel vision and focused. It's not calm, collected, and focused. And she's so much dog. She's too much for her own good in a lot of ways. But if you keep her under control, then she's wonderful. And she's the type of dog that on any given day, because my string is quite a bit bigger now than it was 4 years ago. Now I run 8 very capable bird dogs on that truck. And so, if a dog goes through and they have 5 coveys in one day, that's a really big day for them because they might have only gotten on the ground 5 times in that day. And so that's the way I look at it. Like for her, if I can manage her and get her to that point, and that's also knowing that dog. Another dog, you never put a bark collar on, you never say boo to them, but she would lose her mind and be completely out of control, and you wouldn't be able to run her in front of a client. So she'd be too much. She might run off, which she has done several times. So, it's not.
Golly.
Yeah, Bev is above and beyond what any person needs out there. So.
Well, okay. So this will kind of lead into a little bit of breeding now. What is when you're breeding dogs? We've tiptoed around this a little bit. Like, what are some of the things that you're looking for in your breeding philosophy, really, when you're breeding dogs? Like for her, she sounds like she's a very amped up dog, or a lot of dog. Like you said.
She's a lot.
Is she someone that obviously do her characteristics outweigh her flaws? Would you breed to her and talk a little bit more about that? When
you watch her around birds, it's there's no messing around. There's no. It's funny, for as amped up as she is, when she gets around birds, there's no playing. And that's the one really nice characteristic. It's like every hair on her back is standing up, but she'll stand there for 15 minutes if she needs to. Then I've got a dog named Ace, and I'll just kind of go through the lineup a little bit and explain this. But I've got Ace. And Ace is very aggressive, but he's out of True Confidence, which he has and True Confidence is a dog that you'll hear a lot out of our stock here. But Ace has this tremendous composure around birds, and he's also really aggressive going to them, and he's aggressive in the country. it's a really nice balance to have. And I've never bred him. I've collected him, but I've never bred him yet. And there's some things that I would have to breed around, and I'll kind of go into that. I've got dogs like Penny, which Penny was the best dog on my string 2 seasons ago. She pointed her first year on the string at 2 years old. She had over 100, I think it was 104 or 105 covey finds. And we had a really good string that year of dogs, and just really consistent dog. If it was 90 degrees that year, she would still find coveys. And that, and she's big. She's about 52 pounds. She's a good, strong dog. We produced 2 litters with her. Both have been really nice litters. And she's tremendously easy around birds. So that character around birds, is really fun to watch with her. So
easy, meaning maybe not as intense as the other ones.
You don't have to manage her. You don't have to manage her. You don't have to, like, when she sets up around birds, you just take your time. They're going to be right in front of her. There's she's not wanting to take a step. She's not wanting to knock. She's not wanting to do anything. A lot of these dogs are like that. And her dad is one of my favorite dogs, and that's Bud. He's one of my most enjoyable to run. He's a really nice animal. He was really nice as a puppy. It's kind of, to give you an idea, it was Thanksgiving. I was running him. I was just hunting him with an older dog, and Bud had 4 covey finds in 20 minutes on Huns. And let me get in front of him 3 of the 4 times. And he broke a bone in his foot that night in the lava rock, and he was very aggressive to the country. Like, it didn't matter if you were in lava rock or what you were in. He was very aggressive. He was happily aggressive would be the term. Yeah. Not to the point of losing his head. He was very happily aggressive, maintained composure all the way through. I put him in a kennel run for 6 weeks, and I brought him out. And I mean 6 weeks. He did not come out of the kennel. He was in a 5x10 run for 6 weeks to get healed. When I brought him out, the first workout on the ground was 25 minutes. He pointed 5 coveys in 25 minutes and let me flush, and he let me flush every covey.
Wow.
He had not seen us.
He was still pretty young at that point?
He was eight and a half months old. 8.5 months.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he had not been worked. That's the thing that so what I'm looking for with this breeding is dogs that are not reverting. I don't have to work the same concept 20 times over for you to get this. That's a dog that should never be bred, in my opinion, ever. Because if you can't pick it up within so much and then refine it and make it your own, we'll find a dog that will. We've got plenty of them that will. If I want more physicality, well, there's plenty of dogs to get more physicality out there. There are. But if I want a lot of intelligence, that I'm looking for certain character, and that character goes very far, and it passes down. It passed down with Penny, and then it passed down in another litter. And that's not saying that he dominated it, because those 2 females were very, very good in their own right. So I can only hope that he complements what they are. I cannot expect him to dominate the genes. I just don't. But yeah, he's a really nice animal. And it's not saying he's the best. I'll never say that about any of my dogs, but I enjoy running him the most. So, that's,
So when you're breeding, are you, you said like a lot of people will breed like a hot dog to a hot dog. Are you looking for, let's say you have a awesome male in all areas, and then a female, are you looking for a female that's very different to that male to get some, based on what you're trying to breed for? Or are you like, hey, I want a strong male to a strong female,
Yeah.
it is what it is. We're going to get great dogs.
I want strong females. In the next few years, when people come into the kennel and see the females, they're going to notice that every one of them is 48 pounds and above. I don't want small females. And actually, Bob Whaley, which a lot of people know because of Elhue, his brood females were typically all over 50 pounds.
Okay. Is that typical for pointers? People is it trending smaller right now? Or?
Yeah, especially in the Nastra world. And because they throw a lot of animation, they're smaller boned. People are like, well, you know, they do the same thing a big dog does. You know, they just don't take as much. I'm not going to knock that. It's just not the dog for me. When you take that little dog, that 35-pound dog into Texas, they might do just fine. They might. I'm not saying that they won't. But it's like saying that a 70-pound pointer is going to go through the grouse woods at the same agility that a 40 to 50-pound pointer would, right? Or a 40 to 50-pound dog. They may not. But when a lot of these guys are not looking at the real gait mechanics of these dogs, and that's one of the things that we need to look at a little bit more is the fluidity in their gait and how their mechanics are. Because some of the fastest dogs that I've seen on the ground did not have sheer foot speed, but they were really smooth in their gait, and they stroked in their gait. So their breathing rhythm matched with their gait cycle. So if you think about that, right? So if I'm running, and think about if I'm trying to run a 4-minute mile, right? That's 60 seconds per 400, okay? Or quarter mile, that's 60 seconds, right? So if I'm trying to run that, and if I go out in 55 seconds, everything's spiked. I'm flooding my system of lactic acid. I'm basically depleting my oxygen stores really quick. I'm flooding my body. My breathing is also out of rhythm. Okay, because now I'm amplified, and we all see these dogs, and they're bug-eyed, and they're amplified, and their breathing's like. I don't want that. I want the dog that is almost lazy looking or really collected, and they get amplified when they go to work, and they have great enthusiasm when they go to work. But when they're in their stride mechanics, they may not look fast, but they're constantly in a hunt gait, and they're constantly smooth, and their breathing is in rhythm. I do not want those, like the boxy built, snappy dogs. They're not for me. That's a whole different dog than I want to run. I want to run one that kind of runs more like a thoroughbred. Even if I lose style, I'm okay with that. The other thing that we're seeing a lot in the pointer, we're seeing a lot of post-legged dogs, meaning their hind legs are really straight. They do not work. They're and we're
straight, meaning like from the hip
to the foot.
It doesn't have that
it doesn't have the curve. Yep, exactly.
Okay.
And that will throw more animation, but you'll also tear more CCLs.
Okay.
And so now you take that dog that doesn't have full range of motion and full extension, and say that they're going through high grass, and all of a sudden they hit a hole. Now, and you don't see it once, and then you don't see it for 10 or 15 times, and then all of a sudden, you know, they're 3 years old, and you've got to get a CCL repair. Well, it might work, but then you're going to have to repair the other one because the other one's going to blow out. So back in the day, the guys that wanted to get around that, what they would do is they would breed cowhawk dogs. So their hips were cocked a little bit. And it's like if a runner ran with their foot a little pivoted out. So they bred those dogs a little cowhawked because they had a little bit more range of motion. They were less apt to tearing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my
gosh. But now we're getting, because animation, the aesthetic of a bird dog, because of these courses, and like I said, I'm going to always preface this, I'm not putting them down, but these throwdown trial courses, the aesthetic of that dog in motion is so important to winning, and how they look pointed is so important. That look is so important that snap in their gait, that animation, is caused a lot from being a little bow-legged or real post-legged. But if you're looking at
and people would breed towards that a little bit, right?
Yeah,
because it's such an emphasis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And why not? If your emphasis is to win field trials, then that's what you're doing. Sure. So, and that makes sense. But if we get a whole pool of dogs that are all real straight legged and things, we're going to start having issues, and we already are.
Yeah.
And so we're getting weaker back dogs. We're getting smaller rear ends on them, and we're getting shoulders that are 1.5 feet wide, and the rear end's about 10 inches wide, or vice versa. It's like, so it just we're not always looking at symmetry, and we're not always and conformation truly. And I will say this: conformation. The conformity of a dog starts between the ears, because similar to a human, we might not have the best conformation as a human athlete, but we can manipulate ourselves because our mind is really strong. We can manipulate and know our strengths and know our weaknesses. I would say this: Rue is really old school bred. He's probably one of the oldest true LHU bred dogs in the country, still living. He goes to LHU Strike, I think, 15 times. Well, he looks like LHU Strike. He's got the old houndy look. He's got the sickle tail. He goes back to Redwater Rex, I think, 4 times within 4 or 5 generations. He's got that old school structure to him. Well, that dog never had anything significantly happen to him until he was 10 years old. So, wow. But in order he couldn't compete in today's world. And I'm just going to say, unless he was
look wise,
exactly. Look wise,
in a trial setting,
yes, he could not compete with those dogs. But if you breed him right, in a few generations, you might be able to change things ever so slightly and keep the mind of the dog
and keep the intelligence there.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I've used him for. I'm not saying it's the end all be all, but it's what I'm personally doing. But I guess if it kind of to round back, I don't ever want to put I think going to the shooting dog national or any national championship for anybody is really, really important that follows the sport. The shooting dog national is incredible. You've got 80 dogs that are in it. It's a different qualifying standard. The 80 dogs you could watch performances on for 90 minutes. And, but I guess my thing is a lot of the dogs that run at Ames, you probably don't get to see their full showing unless you watch those dogs up on the prairie. And a lot of them are really incredible. They're incredible athletes. That's like watching the thoroughbred, and the shooting dog might be like watching a really good quarter horse, right? Okay. And so you're watching these thoroughbreds, but in that venue, you may not really get to see their whole abilities, if that makes sense. So the venue might dictate a little differently.
Absolutely.
So,
Oh, Ryan, I'm going to ask 2 more questions here before we kind of wrap this thing up. We're going to skip some of the training stuff and maybe get you back on another time to unpack that a little bit more. But 2 more things I kind of want to ask you about. So in talking, again, about some of these dogs' characteristics and what you're looking for in them, I would like to ask someone, especially someone with some of your experience and knowledge that you've been around bird dogs now. When you're picking a puppy out, say you raise a litter, the genes are good, genetics are all great. But what are you looking for? Say you can pick a puppy to keep from that litter. What are some of the things that you're looking for in a very young 8 to 12-week-old pup when you're picking one out to say, hey, I'm going to keep that dog? What are some of the things you're looking for?
So every year I do buy puppies outside of my stock. I have to. I need to stay up on stuff, and there's things I'm curious of. So a lot of times I've picked, they've all been females. A lot of times I have picked the biggest, I watch their personalities, but I pick the biggest boned female that I can. So I'm looking for body and bone and consistency throughout the body and throughout the bone. And that's the conformational side. I'm not looking for them to be wide elbowed or something like that. But I'm looking for consistency. And from the tip of the tail to the feet, and to their head and structure. The next thing that I'm looking for is, what are they size wise compared to the rest of the litter? Because like I said, you start breeding small dogs to small dogs, you're going to continually dwindle it. So it's going to shorten up gradually. And then I'm looking for their personality, and I'm looking how they move. So there's a lot that you can tell at that age, but there's also, if I'm going to that litter, I've already done my research on why I'm going to that litter. So, that side, when people are like, well, you look at the personality and this and that, well, you're already going to that litter for a darn reason,
Sure.
So when I have gotten multiple pups out of Miller's Unfinished Business, and I've loved the personality out of both of them. And I would say for people, if they wanted pups out of Unfinished Business, you should get some, because they hunt and they're really nice animals to be around. But that's what I'm looking for, is movement and how they move with their mind. And and then when if they're a little bit older, are they relaxed in their movement? So think about, it goes back to how you move as a runner or as an athlete. Are you amped up and then you just stop and look for a direction, or are you relaxed in your running and breathing in your gait? And that goes a long way with the mind being able to cope with everything else that's going on when they're on the ground. So how they're moving, how they're acting. If we go all the way back to watching like Secretariat, and everybody's watched the film for the most part about him, but you watch how he used to move in his gait, and people say, well, he had an enlarged heart, he had enlarged lungs. Well, yeah, but you still got to be able to use those.
Sure.
So you might have all this potential, but you still got to learn how to tap into it. So do they have a mind? And that's what I'm watching, how they move and how they use their mind within that. So
that's great. That's great, man.
I need another pause.
All right. I'm sorry. Dude, no, me too. I have to pee so bad.
Okay.
I'll meet you back here in a second.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's awesome, Ryan. Can you unpack again something you and I've kind of chatted about over the years is roading dogs, and I've loved your just kind of intentionality behind roading. You've seen some of my stuff with biking gauge and that we've chatted here and there. So can you kind of unpack again what's your roading process? Some of the things you've learned along the way over the years.
So I guess I started off using a 4-wheeler and just 2 bars, like a main one, and I used to road Jim Schultz's dogs for him, and when I was living in Flagstaff. And then when I worked for George, I was roading from a horse, and we would couple 4 of them side by side in harnesses. It's kind of similar to being on your bike, and they was right in front of a horse, and you just keep that horse in a walk while the dog's pulled out in front the whole time. And then when I moved home after that, I didn't have much for finances, so I didn't have a 4-wheeler. But what I would do is I got one of those bike tow leashes that you can get on Amazon, and I would put 2 dogs couple, and I didn't have a lot of dogs, so I just would couple them alongside the bike, and they would pull the bike, and I would just feather the brake the whole time. But what I will bring up on that, the style that you do is better because you're actually reiterating their pattern. You notice that, like when you have your dog out in front, you're reiterating, you're in front of me. This is it's the same thing as a horse.
Sure. Yeah,
you're reiterating, this is where you belong, is in front of me. And
not on the side of me, not behind me, but in front.
They do. I mean, there are natural front running dogs that make it look amazing, and that is one of the things that just enhances it. And so now what I have is I've just got a Honda Rancher. I had those spider arms. So I'm going to kind of back up. I had spider arms. I've had other things with them. I've had straight bars and whatnot. But what I've got now, I don't know what they're really called, but it's like a stationary spider arm. We'll just call it that. And it sits in a hitch in the front of the 4-wheeler.
And spider arm, just so people can kind of understand what we're talking about. Out in front of the 4-wheeler, right? It goes into a hitch, and then there's multiple. 6?
Yeah, mine
maybe?
was.
stiff arms that kind of have a little bit of an arch to them?
Yes. And I can't remember. I had either 4 or 6. I can't remember what I had. And then I think I had 4, and then I had like the regular stationary bars, one on the front rack and one on the rear. And then I've got 2, I have a platform on the rear rack with 2 Upland kennels on the back of that. So in case anything goes on with the dog and I had to pick them up. And then I also can, I've got, jug of water back there.
Sure.
So the way I've transformed in this, I do not do anything that gives on the harness anymore. Okay, so any bungees, no bungees,
no
bungees,
no
no flex. It's all gone. Okay, what I want, and actually the only flex that I have is now in a lot of the attachments to the rig, they are actually like a rope, think of like climber's rope with 2 snaps on them. And and I also run all breast collars or breast strapped systems. Okay. And I start some of them off in a Howling Dog Alaska harness, but then I transition them to a breast harness. The reason being for this, so I'll go to the harness first. The reason being for the harness, the muscle memory can make it to where the dog lunges with their head low. That creates muscle memory when you do it enough to drop the head and drop the nose. You're running a bird dog, scent lofts in the air. You want that dog running with a higher or more level head. They do not need to drop that nose. Okay. So I don't want the muscle memory getting to where they heave themselves forward and use incorrect muscles. I basically just want them power walking like a plow horse. Head up, just driving. I am not asking them to be a sled dog. I am asking them to just get a low intensity, high aerobic workout. It'd be like me, if I'm a 4-minute miler, it's me going out for a 7-minute easy run, 7 minutes a mile easy run. It's, it might be highly aerobic, but I'm not going anaerobic. I'm not going over the top, right? So it's within this realm that, and then I might run 7-minute pace up a mountain, up a hill, an incline, consistent. So that would be the comparison. I am not roading anything faster than 8 miles an hour. I'm not trying to do speed. Speed is more apt for injuries. And so, and then down here, it's all sandy roads, so it's easy on their feet. I don't like pavement. I want them on either gravel or dirt roads if I'm not down here. That gravel and that dirt road, I think, is the way to go. So if you can get on like a cinder trail, I don't go any faster than 8 miles an hour. What I'm trying to have is a high aerobic, but low impact. So think of it as like if you were just running an easy run, but instead of being on a flat surface, you were at, like a 5% grade, right? You would build a lot of strength and a lot of endurance. I'm not looking for speed. I'm looking for strength long-term. And then also this is a dog that is enthusiastic. It's not, their thinking isn't like a human, right? So you have to think ahead of them. So when I get those really amped up dogs in the harnesses, I actually want to get them worn down to where they don't think so quickly. They're not racing in their mind. I want them to be really, really controlled about it. And so, because they can get hurt in these harnesses.
So the low impact, kind of low and slow method is kind of de-amping them a little bit.
Exactly. And now they love it. They pull the whole time. I want them pulling, but I want them in a power walk pulling. They might run a little bit and then they go back into a power walk. All I'm looking to do is strengthen the posterior chain of the dog. If you think about a human athlete, we're more efficient when we have a really strong posterior chain. That's the efficiency in our stride is what we're looking for. So if we have a strong back and strong glutes, strong upper hamstrings, and we propel ourselves really well, essentially that's your backside of your core. It's the same thing I'm looking for with the dog. And so that's not they're not sled dogs. They've got a different purpose. And so the running style is what I'm trying to have that harness positioned on them to keep them upright so that they keep,
Sure.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
So here, it totally does. Here's a question for you. So why would someone not just let their dogs free run versus do a roading workout? Is there, if you have the space and land to let your dog free run, would you just recommend doing that, or is there such a benefit to doing some roading like you're talking about?
There's a benefit to the mental aspect of roading. Okay, and I found this when dogs were just free run without birds. What do they get used to doing when you go to hunt? They get to run without birds. They get to doing that. So some of the harnesses, they're a lot different depending on. So you think about like the old plow horses, how they had like a breast harness that came across, and the horse basically powered out of their back and their rear end, and their head was up the whole time. That's essentially, you want this dog, like, you don't need them to go fast in this. All you're trying to do is stimulate them while keeping them in breathing rhythm and producing some muscle. It's really easy for a dog to lose muscle, especially if they're getting worked really hard later in the season. They can lose a lot depending on their genetics. A lot of that is genetic. So, when they do get to some of the either field trials, or if you're hunting them for an extended period of time, if they haven't been worked to be able to metabolize for that long, and you're not feeding them, the way that you need to, genetics can play a big role in it, and hypoglycemia and different things like that. So what I've noticed is the dogs that were consistently roaded had less issues with hypoglycemia, and consistently ate better because of just even a low level workload on a consistent basis, not just sitting other than being pulled out to work. And I've just, mental and physical sides have been overall better, but the free running side of it is, I think, what we're kind of discussing. The free running side is fine, but the problem is if you're free running them a lot, then what happens is they get used to hitting the ground without focus. And so if you have a task, if your dog is like on a lead and you're walking around, and they were used to that, well, they know that the scenario is, well, I'm not hunting right here. My mind is off that subject. But when I transition to the field, what I'm saying is the free running kind of blends things too much. And that for me, and I know that they can come out of it and people will say this and that, but they can also form a lot of bad habits by just free running. And so for me personally, it doesn't work as well. That's just all I can say.
It sounds like you've seen a benefit from doing a controlled workout on a roading harness. Yeah. With your roading, how typically, this might vary, but how long are you going? Are you going for distance? Are you going for kind of a short, like, hey, we're going to knock this out in 20, 30 minutes?
So I start up and I build up. So if I say that I started at like in June, right? For the first few weeks, I might only be going 20 to 30 minutes. I'm not looking, we're not trying to hit a home run. It's like strength training for a distance runner. So strength training is just to add to refinement of what the person naturally does. I'm not trying to take away from what their natural ability is. So if I can just garner a little bit more, then it helps them. The problem is some of these dogs are, and I mentioned it before, they're so dang physical. And I'm not just saying what you look at, but they're so physical. I mean, some of these pointers have been taken up, and used in a breeding programs for sled dogs and things. And I would even say this, I've actually seen some setters that were as much or more physical than pointers. And good Lord, I mean, they're just monsters in a damn harness. I mean, they are. and the setter in particular, or setters in particular I've seen, I'm just like, you're blown away with this animal. And then you look and you see what parents it came out of, and I can't wrap my head around it. I've sometimes seen them, some loud thunder. I've sometimes seen it where, they come out of a really small female, like a 35-pound female, and, an average sized male, and then you get a 60-pound setter. And I'm like, wow. And then they know what to do with it. Like, it's pretty amazing. Yeah. So I guess with a lot of this stuff, you're trying to just refine what is naturally there and bring out a little bit more ability. And so roading is not the end all be all, but if you're in a scenario where you need to get a mental release, because that's what it is. It's a mental release, and a mental focus at the same time. Like, they get to release, but then they get to focus on a task that they can accomplish. Those things are really imperative for a dog to just feel like they've got good quality of life. It's not everything, but it's better than not doing anything. And free running is just, for me, it's really hard to do. So.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Ryan, kind of last thing I like to kind of end with each of guests here. What piece of advice would you give a new hunter out there? Someone who's just maybe getting into bird hunting, bird dogs. What's something that you would tell them?
I guess whatever attracts you, whatever style of dog or whatever style of hunting attracts you, seek out the people that have similar personalities to you, and that are in the sport already, and kind of find that mentorship and then go from there. The tendency is we get on the internet and we see someone that's really good at marketing, and then they tell us what we want to hear because they're essentially selling a product. But I guess when you kind of get over that, you start realizing that there's certain people that you really drive with, and that you'll learn a lot from because you're open to them and they're open to you. And I guess when you find those people, really try to learn as much as you can and enjoy it, because it's just like anything, you'll be going with the grain instead of against it. And so
that's really good.
I think overall, regardless of me being critical about things, as you've heard the last 2 hours, I really, really enjoy dog work. Yeah. I enjoy watching athletes. And so the people that I hang around are also like that. But I also enjoy watching people hunt, and I enjoy watching them get enthusiastic about their stuff. So I sound like a curmudgeon half the time about it, but it's like, that's the joy that they get out of it. And, I'm really quite happy for them for that, because they need it in their life too. Yeah. And so, find what makes you joyful when you're doing it.
Sure. I love that, man. I love, you definitely bleed the love for the dogs and dog work. And, it's been fun hearing more about that, through your story and some of your experiences. So it's been fun, man. Been fun. So last thing we'll wrap up here with is, kind of our rapid fire questions. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions here. Just give me your off the cuff answer, and, we'll bring this thing home. All right. Mm-hmm. All right. So, for you, what came first, the dog, the gun, or the bird?
What's your guess?
I'm pretty darn confident in the dog, but you tell us.
Yep. You got it. Yeah, the dog.
I had a feeling.
And the gun comes last.
Okay.
The gun comes last for me. The dog and the relationship of dog and the bird are so fun to watch for me, and it's so important. So,
are you one of those guys that'll just run your dogs and leave the shotgun in the truck sometimes?
Yeah, I even during the hunting season, if I'm up north working dogs, I actually had a sling made for the side by side.
Okay, no, so nice.
I sling it over my back, and I have a blank pistol on my hip. that's how I work dogs
That's awesome.
during the hunting season. So if a young dog needs to have a bird killed for them, which they all do,
Sure.
then I can step in when they're doing things right, and I can kill them a bird. And then I can go back to the blank pistol.
There you go. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. All right. So when you are hunting, when your goal is to say, hey, I'm going to kill a bird, what gun are you carrying into the field and why?
I carry the Mossberg of Europe. I carry a CZ Bob White 28 gauge side by side.
Okay.
And I dub them I dubbed their brand the Mossberg of Europe. They're just, for me, I can, fall on them. I can do this or that. I don't feel so bad about dinging them up.
Sure.
To me, they're a nice enough gun for a really good working gun.
Yeah.
And, so I'm not too fancy.
Yeah. It gets the job done, and it's going to stand some abuse. So I think that's, sounds perfect.
Exactly.
All right. For you, what is your favorite breed of dog besides the ones you ever owned?
Okay. Is this any breed?
Yeah, sporting dog would be ideal.
Okay. All right. Well, since I own a cocker now, she's out of the picture. But
you picked up a cocker?
Yeah, I've had her for over a year.
Okay.
She's really fun. Okay. I would say a Walker Coonhound, like a really good Walker Coonhound. But I'm gonna throw these in there because people think I hate on a lot of other breeds. I really enjoy wire hairs.
Wire hairs, okay.
Yeah, I've worked a number of them. I've really, really enjoyed them.
Okay.
And then, so I'm gonna. You're not gonna like. I'm gonna throw them three. Wire hairs, and then there are some setters that I really, really enjoyed.
Okay.
And they were just phenomenal animals. And people are gonna twist their nose up at that because they hear me all the time. But tremendous animals. But then a couple Brittany's that I've worked up really like too. Between French Brittany and American.
Okay.
I just enjoyed those breeds. Most of them I can find enjoyment in. It's more the individual, but the wire hairs, for some reason, in the last few years, have been really cool to work with.
Because those, I mean, just off the cuff, those seem very, very different than a pointer would be. So is it just this? Yeah. What is it about them that piques your interest?
They're a killer.
Okay.
They're a flat out killer. That's what they've been bred for. That's what they've been designed for. A Brittany is more of a finesse dog. A Brittany and a lot of these pointers are, because I worked a little bit with Nolan Huffman, and his Brittany's are more like my pointers as far as personality. They just are, and I enjoy that side of them. I mean, there are some setters I got to see this year that I just really enjoyed who they were. And then it's just like a setter's just, in a lot of ways, mentality wise, like a pointer for me.
Sure.
If they're goofy and crazy, I just don't. It's not my cup of tea.
Right.
But if they're really relaxed and focused, and then do a heck of a job, oh man, hats off to them. That's the type of dog it's the focus that I like.
That's awesome, man.
And it's the performance that I really enjoy.
Sure.
That's probably what I'm drawn to. So when I know that a wire hair is a killer, like, that's cool to me. Like,
you're like,
that is so cool to me, you know, because they're just like, they're a monster.
Yeah.
And then, so
that's
sorry,
awesome.
I there's a lot of them out there.
I'm new. That's a very, very hard question for some people. So I get it.
Yeah.
All right. Couple more here. Favorite bird to hunt and why? And you can only give me one.
Huns. Yeah.
Okay.
Huns. And the impact that it makes on a young dog's mind is one of the greatest that I've seen. So every time a dog has a contact with birds, if it's a single bird that gets up, it doesn't typically make as large of an impact unless the dog's like really engaged in the situation. But Huns can draw that attention and draw that focus in, and they're screeching and squawking at an explosion as one unit off the ground. It makes this awesome impact. And they're territorial, they're cocky, they're just funny. They're funny birds. That's awesome. And they're beautiful. They're just beautiful. So, I really like them a lot.
Okay. That's awesome. So, all right. 2 more here. Your go-to snack on a hunting trip.
Okay. So I was thinking about this before. I was talking to my mom before this, and I was like, she goes, well, do you eat anything? I said, yeah, I started eating like almonds, like those flavored almonds.
Oh yeah. Like we're talking honey mustard. Yeah.
Well, I don't know the name of the brand. They have like salt and vinegar and different flavors like that.
Oh yeah.
So they're like a little handheld tube kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah, like grab and go snacks, sure. And then pistachios.
Oh, good old pistachio.
Yeah. So those, when I first moved west, I never ate or drank anything. If I was on the ground with dogs for 3 or 4 hours in a row, like continuous, the only water I carried was for the dogs. And so, and a lot of times I was going up over the hills in Hell's Canyon, and I was putting in 3 to 4 miles an hour of hiking. And so like, it was, for me, I'm like, oh, well, this is comparable to what I used to do training wise. So it's not that hard. Until you make yourself black out.
Oh gosh.
Then it's like, oh, okay.
I need something.
I don't need to be this, what I'm doing. So I've altered that a bit.
I'm sure.
But those, I don't know why, but nuts, I don't know.
Yeah, those are good. It's a good little snack. Yeah, got some good protein for you. Yep. And that's a good choice. Last one, beverage of choice after a hunt.
Okay, so my mom said Yingling, but we don't really get that out west. And I don't drink beer that much, but I would go with 2, either like a Corona with salt and lime.
Okay.
Or just a fountain Coke over ice.
Fountain Coke over ice. Classic.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, just something really kid-like and basic.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I was gonna say, you're getting a little fancy with the salt and lime, but the traditional Coke over ice, I'll take it.
Yeah. But I'm not too difficult with that stuff.
Yeah, pretty simple.
If I get out and I'm been training in Hell's Canyon for a long day, like any soda,
just something.
Yeah.
Bubbly and good. So, well, Ryan, this has been so much fun, man. Thank you so much for carving out some time and just sharing your journey with us and just unpacking some fun topics. I think that's I've loved kind of picking your brain over the years, and so just thanks for taking the time to do that.
Hopefully I don't offend anybody. That's never my intent. I just, I have a lot to learn myself. So
absolutely.
But I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely,
so
Ryan. Well, thank you so much again. Okay. This has been a blast, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's a wrap of episode 83 in our part 2 conversation with Ryan Mulcahy from Born to Run Kennels. Ryan, again, thanks so much, man, just for taking some time and unpacking. Again, your thoughts and experiences around bird dogs, even pushing the envelope on, training bird dogs on wild birds. I think that's a concept that's just maybe a little foreign to some. Maybe a lot due to access and all that kind of stuff. But I love your approach. I love your mindset around developing bird dogs, man. So thanks again for taking the time to unpack that here on the show. Hey guys, if you have not already, go over and leave a rating and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Would greatly help the show get out there to more hunters, more bird dog lovers just like you, and to help get this show out there. Other than that, stay tuned. We got a couple cool guests here coming up in the next few weeks, and head over to patreon.com/the Upland Rookie Podcast. Get signed up for the next giveaway with Gunner Kennels and giving away a fan kit 2.0. Keep your dogs cool all training season, trial season, heading into the summer. So it's going to be important. Keep them cool in their crate. So anyways, until next time, go put some miles on those boots and follow your favorite bird dog. Take care.